Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Oh, that sounds so dry.
A long day.
Oh, gee, your day always longer than everybody else's day. I don't understand why. It's the same 24 hours, and to me, the time goes very fast. So I don't know how your days get long. You will have to explain that to me. These long days you keep talking about. Because my days are short. You have a different kind of days from me.
Dealing with my daughter, I know. Virtual learning as well.
Nah, hold on now. By now, you should be used to that.
They just
No?
start again.
I thought by now you'd be used to that.
Somewhat.
Oh, okay. Because it should be getting easier now.
It's just that when they don't want to do work. I have a 7-year-old.
Oh, playing is much more important.
Definitely.
But play is good,
Yeah.
Because that's when they show their creativity.
Which is true.
Yeah, so you can't dampen them on that. I think that's why we don't have a lot of children who are more free-spirited.
And creative, yeah.
Yeah, building things with their hand, like doing more sculpting and carving and crafts and painting.
Right.
And yeah, we don't have that because we don't create it.
As opposed to them playing the games and being indoors.
Yeah. Let them go outside and see nature and do things, and guess what? And they'd make a lot of money.
Guess what? Just how you said that, my husband bought a butterfly catch net, a whole set where she have the glass and catch the butterflies, the caterpillars, and all that stuff. And that's what she does.
Okay, yeah, so that's one good thing because
Yeah.
she could actually take those butterflies, cure them, put them like in a picture frame.
The case, yeah.
Yeah, and then you could sell it.
That's true.
Because then they'll just be butterflies from the Bahamas, was indigenous to the Bahamas. Then she could do it for every family island. There's so many different ways for these young people to make money.
Oh yeah.
Because people are looking to buy something that's different.
That's true.
Because they have plenty of money to waste. Yeah, because they're making a lot of money, so
Yeah.
it's a good thing to do.
That's true.
It's really good.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. I just think about these things as I watch more movies. I see people just do a lot of crazy things. And I say we could be doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, think about it. It's
I
it's
will.
it's it's, it's a good hobby, and then after a while it could turn into money making business.
That's true.
All right, so it's 6:05. Should we wait? I didn't hear anything.
A few more minutes, I guess. I don't know. How many persons need to come in?
Right now there are 4 of you. Last time we started with 6.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it was 6. This is an easy topic. I let you all do the talk since you all should know about money laundering and real estate.
I do understand.
You understood it, right?
Pardon?
I said you understood it when you read it?
We on 7. No?
7.
What's
We
7?
did we did 8 last week. Practical exam of legal documents. So we're doing 9. You forget? Customer due
Yeah.
diligence.
I'm on the wrong page.
Yes, you forget. Even you corrected me. So I don't know what happened to you today. I don't know. Real estate. Let me see. I hear you turning the page. That's only telling me you didn't read.
I read. Let me see.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. My book came out of the page. My notes.
Oh,
Let's try reading more.
Google asks me a bunch of stupid questions. I don't understand why.
Here we go.
Do capture.
Mm.
When you do certain things, like whenever you're trying to do a research on anything that's criminal,
Mm-hmm.
they tell you it's against the terms and condition.
Oh Lord.
And they don't understand. It's what you do with the information.
Exactly.
How do they know what my intent is?
That's true.
They think my intent is criminal.
Right off the bat.
Right off, before I can even get to where I want to go.
Hmm.
I don't understand. Let me see. I don't want anything like that. Lord. Plus. What happened here? Come on.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, we have 6 persons now. We're getting ready to start.
Okay.
I'm fine. I am fine. I just was saying that the time goes so fast.
I know, right?
Yeah, see, now you agree with me.
Yes.
I mean, it's too fast. 1 minute I looked at my thing and I said, it's 4 o'clock. I have plenty time. The next minute I look, it was 5 minutes to 6.
Same thing happened.
And I said, well, what is this? It's going too fast. Let me see if I can find some. Let me see. Gotta find a nice case. I could use some of these. All right. So let's start. And some people had long days and some people had short days. and some had in between days. And I was saying a few minutes ago, I said, this chapter on customer due diligence, I need to let you all speak so I can see what you all have learned, since this has become one of the key areas for the FATF in most jurisdictions. This is one of the areas where a lot of focus was not, and attention was not put on trying to see how real estate as a product was being used or still being used by persons who wish to launder their money. So the first thing before you could even consider whether or not some of this money laundering is, you have to know what is money laundering. So who could define money laundering for me in just layman's term?
It's, I guess, money laundering is when a person conceals the true nature of the funds to commit criminal activities.
Not to commit,
Or through, yeah, through,
that they've already committed it.
they're trying to mask it basically by pushing it through legitimate businesses.
Right. So that's what they do. What they do is they try to conceal it, and there are different ways in which they can conceal money. And or just so that it becomes legitimate. And even locally, you could see over time, persons who were rumored to have been in the drug business over time, they have legitimized their monies. And so it's very difficult now to say, well, okay, that building there is from the proceeds of crime, because they have intertwined it with legitimate business over time. Some of it's quite evident. So there are 3 stages of money laundering, which everyone knows. There's placement. That's when you actually dispose of the cash proceeds. That's the first step. And then you have layering. And that's when you use different methods of placements of the funds in different entities and different transactions, trying to disguise the true identity of the source of the funds. And then, of course, the last one is integration. And that's when those monies now go back into circulation within the community as legitimate funds. So in order for there to be a crime of money laundering, you do not need to have all of the 3 stages. Any one of them is sufficient to say that the offense of money laundering has been committed. And so any organization always have to consider what are the risks imposed on the products and services that they offer to their clients. So every product that you offer, you have to think about what is the risk of money laundering, and what is the risk of terrorist financing, and what is the risk of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. That has to be done with any product that a company offers or services. So we go to our recently passed legislation, the 2018. Anyone know why we had to revamp our AML framework? What's the rationale for these new suite of legislation in 2018?
Is it because we were being blacklisted and certain bodies were saying that, the Bahamas isn't doing enough to combat AML and terrorist financing?
Yeah. So it wasn't the former point, it was the latter point. They were of the view that the Bahamas was not, didn't have enough filings of suspicious transaction, didn't have enough criminal cases on money laundering, and it didn't have sufficient cases on forfeiture of assets for money laundering. So when you would look at the news saying this amount of marijuana was burnt, this amount was seen, this amount of drugs passed through, this amount of drugs were caught. What they're saying is there's an anomaly between those stories, those capture, those that pass through the Bahamas that make it to the United States. They're saying, why isn't this being captured in the statistics in the Bahamas? So that's why they put us on the blacklist to say, guess what? In your laws, there are too many loopholes. Two, in your laws, you don't have the, let me say, the participants in your financial sector and your non-financial sector don't seem to be able to identify what is money laundering. They are not filing suspicious transaction that can materialize into persons being prosecuted for money laundering. In addition to that, they said that in order to identify what is a risk for the jurisdiction, a risk in terms of money laundering, the country should have already identified, just based on its jurisdiction, its geographical location, the country should have already identified also based upon the sectors, what are the money laundering risks that are inherent in this jurisdiction. So they said these were the weaknesses and the Bahamas must address it. So if you vaguely remember that, or you remember that, tell me what was the next step that we did, or what steps did we take in order to get off that blacklist?
We implemented the new laws, and we also stiffened the penalties.
Yes. A little bit more. Didn't we start the national risk assessment?
Oh yeah, that too.
We started, yeah, that one is very important. Because based on the national risk assessment, those from that committee and that assessment, you see the identified risk that are in the Proceeds of Crime Act. So based upon the Proceeds of Crime Act, they define what they call identified risk offense. And that would have come from the national risk assessment. That wasn't a risk assessment that was done on every sector of the Bahamas, not just financial, not just tourism, every sector. And they identified that the risk offenses in the Bahamas are corruption, cybercrime, human trafficking, money laundering, or the financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, or financing of terrorism. Those are the main risks that they have identified. Of course, there are other risks that can come up, but right now, these are the ones that they have identified. The only way they'll be able to say that there are other identified risks will be based on if the participants in the market decide to file STRs, either with the FIU or there are reports that are filed with the police. So under the Proceeds of Crime Act, there are offenses. And the first one is concealing. So it says it's an offense if you act with knowledge or you have reasonable suspicion that a person is concealing the proceeds of any crime, that they are disguising it, they are converting it, they're transferring it, or removing it out of the jurisdiction. There's an obligation on everyone who is a part of that institution, if they have knowledge or reasonable suspicion, to report it. In the old legislation, it was left up to the MLRO alone, but now it's everybody's job to be able to detect if money laundering is taking place or any one of the identified risk offenses. The next one is arrangement. It is an offense if you know, or you suspect, or you ought to reasonably have known or suspected that you have entered into or you're entering into an arrangement, and that facilitates either the acquisition, the retention, the use, or the concealment, or the control of the proceeds of crime on behalf of another person. The third one is the acquisition, use, and possession. Again, the act says that if you know or you suspect or ought to reasonably have known or suspected that he or she acquired or is acquiring the proceeds of crime, or they use it or is using the proceeds of crime, or they possess it or possessed it in the past tense, it is a crime. So in addition to that, the Act gives you the ancillary offenses. It says it's a failure if you do not disclose to the FIU or to the police that you know or you suspect or you reasonably ought to have known or suspected that another person is engaged in money laundering or committing an offense, such as corruption or human trafficking. And whenever you suspect, again, the law says that you have to file or you have to advise within a reasonable time. It means you cannot wait weeks and months trying to figure out whether you should or should not do it. Everything has to be what they call practicable. So if you knew today, from a practical term, when do you think you should file? Being practical.
Today?
Yeah, the same day. But you know, most people are afraid.
Yeah, because you have no protection.
Yeah, so they're afraid. A lot of people are afraid. They know, but they're not going to say. Because I'm sure when a lot of these persons come in to make deposits or to apply for a loan, they know exactly who these people are. They know what they do, but they're afraid. Then, of course, the MLRO, if that person knows or suspect or has reasonable grounds to know or suspect and they do not file, they themselves can face an offense and a penalty. So notice what the Act says. It says, if you know or you suspect. So you don't really have to know all of the facts. Once you have a suspicion or you reasonably ought to have known, and that reasonableness comes from knowing what are the identified risk offenses, what are the stages of money laundering, and then what's happening within the sector. And what's happening within the sector would come from your annual AML training and any other training you have in between as the things that you should be looking out for. So in addition to knowing what the law requires, under the Proceeds of Crime Act, you also have the Financial Transaction Reporting Act and its regulation. And they outline customer due diligence, whether the client is an individual, whether it's a company, whether it's a trust, a foundation, any kind of legal arrangement. It tells you what's required. And it says that every institution, it is mandatory that they carry out a risk assessment to identify, assess, and understand its risk related to its clients, the countries where they operate, the products and services, the transactions, and the delivery channels. Every company has to do that, not just a financial institution. So it says the institution must identify the identity of whoever is coming in as the client using a very verifying, reliable, independent source of documents, data, or information. They have to identify and verify the identity of any person purporting to act on behalf of. That means anyone that they give power of attorney to, anyone who's acting as an agent of the company. They have to understand as appropriate and obtain information on the purpose and intended nature of the business relationship. And of course, as the relationship change, then of course, more due diligence has to be carried out. They have to know who owns it and who controls it. They have to identify and verify the beneficial owner of every facility. And if it's corporate, the beneficial ownership of 10% or more controlling interest. The regulation states that the mandatory documents required by a financial institution to verify the existence of a facility holder. Simplified due diligence is carried out on low risk unless there is a suspicion. So you could onboard a client or you could do business with a client that is low risk. And then over time, that client can move from low risk to medium risk to high risk. And that could be just from someone being an ordinary person to someone then deciding that they're going to run in the next election next year. The next one is enhanced due diligence. And this is normally done when you look at the transaction with the client, or you look at the beneficial owner of the client, and you look at the jurisdiction where they're coming from, and you look at the risk that can be proportioned to that client and the nature of their business. The financial institution is required to examine as far as possible the background and purpose of all complex, unusually large transaction and all unusual patterns of transactions which have no apparent economic or visible purpose. And that is why they always saying that real estate is one of those areas that has been used over the years for money laundering. Because in most instances, it involves large amounts of cash or a large transaction. The financial institution also have to mitigate against any risk identified with respect of the facility holder, the beneficial owners, or the financial institution assessed as high risk. So in your institution where you work, who have you classified as high risk? Whereby enhanced due diligence is required.
One of the groups are PEPs.
But PEPs automatically makes it high risk.
Right. We also look companies like international companies, like anything
IBCs?
foreign. Yes. Anybody
Persons from a certain country. Persons from a certain country.
Yes. And
they also look at the.
Go ahead.
Sorry, those who hold account balances over a certain threshold or limit.
So, give me an example when you say those who hold balances over a certain threshold, make them high risk.
Like high net worth customers then. That answers you.
But do you use that in a combination with something else? Just because I have $10 million, that makes me high risk?
No, because we look at all, like you look at your source of funds and your source of wealth. We look at all of that as well.
No, I'm only asking because I know for high-risk clients require more due diligence, more frequency in analysis. And I'm just asking if the rationale for you doing enhanced due diligence because they are high risk, what is the risk? You understand what I mean?
You mean the amount of frequent deposits they're making?
Yeah, you have to look at it from a transactional point of view. Unless, of course, you're querying that the source of funds, there's a risk in that, or the source of wealth, there's an inherent risk in that. But not just because I have a balance of $10 million or $50 million makes me high risk. What is the risk? You understand what I mean?
So, but to fill out a DSF to say where they got the funds from?
Yeah, but I mean, even before that, if you were onboarding a client, using what she said, if you're onboarding a client and the client is bringing in, they say the expected amount they're bringing in is 50 million. They'll start with 5, they go up to 50 million. What makes them high risk? You have to qualify making them high risk.
Right. So if let's just say, like from the example you gave, like let's just say, okay, when we did the enhanced due diligence, we look at this customer was a former PEP or like depends on.
All right. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Right.
okay,
You have
okay.
right. You have to identify what are the risks. And remember, like I was saying earlier, a client, when you onboard them, they can be low risk, but their risk can change. They can move from a low risk to a high risk. And that's how you can always sometimes detect whether money laundering is taking place, because they come in as low and then they automatically just change to high.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they do is they test to see what kind of controls, what kind of systems you have in place to see what you can and cannot detect. And they normally ask certain questions in order to see how far they could go.
To stay below the radar.
Yes. And the question will appear to be very innocent, but they're not. It's a method.
Yeah, because I just was going to say, we don't want to alert them or to give them any insight as to how we go about in assessing them.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. So like how you say, it sounds like a general question, but the answers really, what we do next depend on how you respond and how we would classify you.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But don't forget now, these people have sources at their beck and call.
When you say so,
they know a lot.
Well, like from what I know, they know certain things, but certain things they still are unsure. So they will ask you questions. Like they'll end up asking you the questions.
Yes.
They'll turn around and ask you questions knowing that what they know. Yes. And they want to be careful in how they handle their accounts going forward.
Plus, they would ask you the question, but then they'll go to a different branch and try to do the transaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, you see when you look at other jurisdictions, what I read today, which country was that? Australia, Canada, I mean, the United States has quite a bit of real estate being used for money laundering. And these people are not talking those small figures. They're talking in the billions. So again, we have a lot of keys for sale. We have a lot of houses for sale. But what the FATF and the CFATF is saying is all of these are all legitimate. There have not been one case, half a case, a quarter of a case where there was some suspicion of money laundering, because it's happening in all other jurisdictions. So that's the question that's always in their mind. When you look at the amount of monies that flow in this country, the way real estate is being bought and sold, and at such high prices, how come we don't have any cases of real estate being used by money launderers? It's a question, right?
Yeah.
That's a legitimate question.
Yeah. And it's one that you have to consider, because even though we passed this legislation, if they don't see any changes in terms of prosecution, they're coming back again. So they say whenever you have a client that is a PEP, you have to do enhanced due diligence. And one of the key things you have to look at when you do a PEP is who are they doing business with? Because that's the key in money laundering. Because the PEP is not going to put everything in their name. Things are going to be going through on their behalf through their affiliates. Either spouse, friend, cousin, neighbor, classmate. They will use all of those. And remember now, whenever you're going to deal with a PEP, that must have senior management approval or goes through an acceptance committee, the same as a high risk account. And like you all said, you have to know the source of wealth and the source of funds. But remember, those documents too can also be fraudulent. If you're getting those documents from other places around the world.
But even if they're fraudulent though, if let's just say something takes place, and the financial institution did not pick up or did not detect that it was fraudulent, and money laundering takes place where the client is involved, the bank or the institution can still claim that, well, they did all they can. Because like they say, they're not police officers, they just do their due diligence, and that's all they're required to do.
And when you realize that, so this is, say this is at 11 o'clock in the morning, and you realize that it's come to your knowledge now that the source of wealth was not what they said it was, and it really looks suspicious now, based upon the document itself, was fraudulent. What do you do?
This is after the institution realized that some illegal activity took place.
Yes.
Well, you still have to report it.
But even if no activity has taken place, remember now, even if it came to your knowledge that the documents that were provided to you were fraudulent, you should still file, because then it becomes a police matter. Your fraudulent documents. That means that this person could have accounts in other places around the world using the same fraudulent documents. So it becomes a police matter.
Yes.
So whenever you deal with PEPs, you know who PEPs are. Who are PEPs in the Bahamas?
Politically, people, politicians, and
military officers,
senior government officials,
ambassadors,
judiciary, and the senior executives of publicly owned companies, family island administrators, anyone who is in a position of authority and has access to money should be classified as a PEP. In the family islands, monies will go to a certain administrator, and then they're responsible for paying out all the different workers and contractors and awarding small contracts. Those persons should also be on your list, because they also have an opportunity to launder money. Did you think of those?
Yeah.
So what about like board members, like the board, the various boards? Did you think?
No, they don't have access to cash.
But I think some banks they classify those persons as PEPs. Some institutions do it.
Why?
I don't know.
What's a board member?
I guess they say they hold influential. I don't know what the rationale is, but I know few institutions that I know, the board directors and their members, and their families.
Yeah, families.
A board? Give me an example of a board.
Like the Bahamas Development Board, the Port Authority Board, like those type of boards.
Yeah, they're publicly owned corporations, eh?
Yeah, they're publicly owned corporations. That's why.
Included, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
They're publicly owned, not the private ones.
No, not the government boards.
The government boards.
Okay.
Yeah, because they have influence.
Right. Okay.
They have influence, and of course, they could get kickbacks. Yeah, so that's what they're watching for, kickbacks.
So when they say judicial or military officials, these would be like senior officers, or
Very, very senior police
Very
officers
senior,
and
okay.
defense force officers. Yeah, the very,
Okay.
very, yeah. Because you know our police force, our upper police force is wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, get first lieutenant, second, third, fourth, fifth. You don't go too far down the line because a lot of them don't really have any power.
Right.
It is carrying a title.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing you have to look at. Like, depends on the organization. You have to look to see what's the structure. I'll give you an example. There was a client that we're trying to onboard. He was a how would you call him? He would have been like a commodore of a police unit. A police unit, yeah. He's a commodore in the police unit. And he had staff of almost 60, and he had responsibility for various territories in Europe. But guess what? When you look at the structure of their whole armed forces, he was so far down the line, it wasn't funny.
Mm-hmm.
But just reading what he did and his responsibilities, you would assume that he was in the top echelon, but he was not. He was not. The only thing he had power to do was the power to drive his team. That was it. No access to monies, making no policies, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing you have to look at. What exactly when people come with these titles and these positions, what exactly do they do? It's the same thing sometimes with ambassadors. Some ambassadors only ambassador on a sheet of paper. They're not real ambassadors. They don't do anything. They have no power. They just carry out instructions. And some of them only do like analytical work. They're not really in that country, like carrying out projects on behalf of their home country. So sometimes you will have ambassadors who will actually argue that they are not a PEP because they hold no authority in that jurisdiction. And then you have to make note of that. Because, you know, like you said before, once you're a PEP, then you want to know who their family members are.
Mm-hmm.
And some people don't want you to go that far because they say they don't have any authority to do anything. All I do is just gather information and send it back to my home country. I don't do any projects. I have no money. Only thing I have is just my salary, and that's why I'm opening this account. That's it.
So does the institution confirm this information with their employer or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Because don't forget now the client is already refuting that my ambassadorial position does not involve me carrying out anything to do with money. I don't make any decision. And so if they can provide a letter from their home country foreign affairs, that is their status within that jurisdiction and their role, then yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we know PEPs are always considered high risk. And an institution should consider the following KYC information when you speak about PEPs and to mitigate against the risk. One is the geographic location. So yes, the person is a PEP, so we know that. So they're high risk. But then there are other mitigating risks you have to look at. Then you look at them from the jurisdiction they're from. They could be a PEP, which is high risk, but then they could be from a jurisdiction that is low. The source of wealth, once you've done your investigation, then say, yes, the source of wealth is good money, is old money. We can trace this money right back to their grandfather, so that lessens the risk even more. And then you look at the source of funds. Okay, they have a business. They had this business a very long time. They send us the financial statements of the company. We see the profit, or we see this is a company. We know that the profit from the company then goes up to another company and then paid in the trust fund. And we know from the trust fund that he gets X percentage on an annual basis or a semi-annual basis. So even though the PEP is high risk, within that PEP category itself, with other high-risk category, with other high-risk clients, this PEP is not that high risk. He's just high risk. You understand what I mean? So your analysis in reviewing your high risk account would focus more on those that have more activity and more risk all around. Because the mitigant for that high risk client is not as bad as another PEP or another high risk country that's operating in a high risk jurisdiction, high risk transactions, high risk business. Is a difference in the way in which you monitor that relationship. So KYC is know your client. And that's when organizations verify a client's ID, get information on their business, and then they look at the potential risk that the client may present to the company. And then they make a business decision on whether they want to accept or whether they want to continue that business relationship. Customer due diligence is where you get additional information. And that's to update a client profile. And what you do when you get this, when you get additional information, what you do is you do a further assessment on the potential risk that the client poses to the organization. So say when the client first came and they were onboarded, they were in selling car parts. Now they're in the business of importing cars and selling car parts. Has the risk increased? Because you know, if you're bringing in cars, what does your suspicious mind say?
That they may be stolen.
Mm-hmm.
1, next thing.
What else you bringing in with those cars?
There you go.
The vehicles.
Guns.
That's right. Within the vehicles, underneath the vehicles, in the tires. Okay, so there's more risk. So whenever the nature of the business of your client changes, you have to assess the risk. And then you also have to make a decision whether you're going to do more monitoring or whether or not this is a case that needs to be considered, whether or not the company should continue or de-risk.
Yeah.
So financial institutions and also financial and corporate service providers, they have to establish know your customer policies and procedures as a part of their due diligence process. So they could thoroughly vet their prospective clients and they're able to monitor them. Especially those that provide corporate financial and fiduciary services. So included in that would also be the real estate sector. Real estate agents, real estate companies, they have to know who they're doing business with. So they're also now required to have policies and procedures. So under the Act itself, it makes it mandatory for institutions to exercise a risk-based, ongoing due diligence throughout the course of each business relationship. And so that means ensuring that your documents and your information and records are kept up to date and they are relevant. And you also do regular reviews of existing clients, particularly high-risk facility holders. So high-risk clients are reviewed annually. Medium risk clients are done every 2 years and low risk is every 3 years. You have to scrutinize the transactions to ensure that they are consistent with the knowledge of the customer. So if you have a client and the client says they're in this business, then you have to make sure that when the transactions go through the account that it makes sense. And then you have to look at the risk profile based upon what they do. So if you have a fisherman and he says his main business is he brings in snappers, grunts, goggle eye on a weekly basis. He goes out to Montague, he sells those, then he goes back out. He do have some restaurants that he facilitates large amounts with them. Those normally are done once a month or every 2 weeks. What's the anticipated amount you normally get from them? Oh, anywhere between $2,000 to $5,000. Okay. And the small ones, I sell them retail. So then he comes in now, and instead of him bringing in a deposit every week of $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, he now comes in with $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. What will you do?
File a suspicious transaction report.
Because something ain't right, right?
Yep.
Either he's selling a different type of fish, or he has new clients, or he got a new supplier and he has things in bulk. And who is he selling it to? So that's when it comes to knowing your client and scrutinizing your transactions.
Ms. Archer, are there certain professions that are considered high risk?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one is?
A fisherman.
People that deal in diamonds.
Lawyers.
Lawyers, not necessarily lawyers. They are a part of what they call intermediaries.
The number houses.
Gaming is high risk, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lawyers would go along with corporate service providers, real estate agents. All of those are intermediaries. They are high risk. Persons operating boats, high risk. Persons operating small chartered planes, medium-sized chartered planes, high risk. So one thing about an organization, when you onboard a client, or even a client comes to get a mortgage, you have to see whether or not that client has a good reputation and that their business activities is lawful. I know now in banks, when it comes to dealing with mortgages and loans, everybody have these large quotas that they have to meet. And so they desperately trying to see who is eligible for loans. But you have to make sure that these people have a good reputation and they're in a good business, a reputable business, and that you can actually legitimize where the monies are coming from. So whenever a person conducts or seeks to conduct any transaction through or with a financial institution, the financial institution knows or suspect, or they have reasonable grounds to suspect that a transaction or proposed transaction involves the proceeds of crime, or an offense is an attempt to avoid the enforcement of the Proceeds of Crime Act, or is an identified risk, it is mandatory that that institution report that transaction or proposed transaction to the FIU. Because remember that a transaction doesn't have to be completed. Even if someone comes and poses, let's say you know that person, and that person said they were coming to get a mortgage. They've come and they've asked you a series of questions, maybe on 3 different times. Now they want to fill out an application form. Then they decide to change their mind. If you suspect that those funds were the proceeds of crime, or they were about to do something to facilitate a criminal act, you have the duty to report it. So a suspicious transaction report is a written report, and it is normally prepared by the MLRO and then submitted to the FIU. And from the FIU, then it will go to the financial crime unit in the police force. So of course, failure to file or an STR will result in a criminal liability. And of course, there are fines and imprisonment for the MLRO and or the institution. And the auditors or anyone giving tax advice or anyone who's doing notarial services or the MLRO, if they fail to disclose that there is a suspicious transaction, of course, there is a fine and imprisonment. You see that? You see the years? 12 years
Mhm.
and $500,000. Or you can go for 20 years. That's a very long time. When you've seen the STR document, you'll see it asks you for the name and the date of birth and the address. They'll ask you what are the transactions that triggered your suspicion. And then they want you to explain why, or why is this transaction, or why is this amount suspicion? What do you suspect? So at the very first section of the SDR, you have to tick what you suspect it is, whether it's money laundering, whether it's terrorism, whether it's proliferation of weapons, or whether it's fraud, or if it's corruption. So the story that you tell on the last page leads to the very first indicator of what you think the identified risk offense is. So normally when you onboard a client, as a part of due diligence and a best practice, you always get the person's full name, their home address, their business addresses, and that'll give you their date of birth, where they work, their nationality. You normally get 2 reference letters from a financial institution, original, because Bahamians fake those too. They write them themselves. Copies of the relevant pages of the passport of the ultimate beneficial owner, a recent utility bill or credit card statement, copies of their ID cards, and of course, information on the source of wealth and the source of funds for the client who's seeking the mortgage, and any information on the personal or commercial rationale for obtaining the mortgage loan. Do you normally ask clients that? Why do you want a mortgage?
Yeah, you always have to state the purpose of the loan.
And what they normally say?
Well, I mean, most people want a mortgage to buy a piece of property or a home or to build.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But you've never suspected that was not the real reason?
I mean, sometimes if they come in, not if it's a first time situation, not they come in for like a further charge or something, it may not be for the reason they state, but they would have already, had the existing facility. But I've never, I have never had any suspicions.
Okay. Anybody else had any suspicion?
Yeah, I've had 1 or 2 cases where there was a client that had a business, like a tourist-oriented business,
Mm-hmm.
and they had they had good cash flow, but there was just something suspicious about them getting a mortgage, right? It was just something suspicious about it, and just from the interview, you could tell like it was almost, you could tell that they had plans to launder the money through the account. Like they had some money, like they had this, they keep saying about this cash, if they wanted to inject this X amount of cash.
Ah, okay,
They
okay.
want to inject this amount of cash, and but they wanted this mortgage, in my mind, to clean up this cash that they had.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That was one of the, that was the one example of where we felt a little suspicious.
Did you file?
I don't know. I don't remember us filing.
Mm.
I don't remember us filing, but I know that they didn't do the loan
They
application.
didn't do the loan, yeah. But it should have been filed, because sometimes they try more than one bank.
Yeah.
You see? And so when it all comes together, then the FIU will be able to see that there's a pattern. You see, if you don't, you see, if you don't file reasonable suspicion, the FIU is unable to tell which sector is weak.
The thing is, Ms. Archer, this was so many. It makes sense now when you hear stories, or you hear when you do stuff like this, where you learn about more and more about this KYC, then you realize. So hindsight 2020, like what I know now, you could tell like maybe 20 years ago it wasn't as suspicious, or 25 years ago it wasn't as suspicious as it is now. But in hindsight, when you think about it, even though they didn't go through with the mortgage, it was obvious that there was something else going on.
Right.
So even though they had the FIU and all these other reporting requirements and reporting of suspicious transactions, I don't know that they had that about 25 years ago.
Let me see. No, the FIU, when we would have first started, would have been in 2000. So no, but you would have still go to the police. You could have reported it to the police. So now, because what I want, Jessica, you have that example. That's what I want the class to begin to appreciate. When people come for mortgage loans or any loan, there's always you always get that suspicion when there is something just not adding up, and then they either press you with questions, or they call you afterwards to ask, can I do this? Can I do that? And with a typical mortgage or a typical loan, how a typical person would react. So real estate is not different from any other sector. And has the same type of predicate offenses that can lead to money laundering or terrorist financing. So it could be forgery, it could be fraud, it could be tax evasion, it could be embezzlement, and violation of specific statutes relating to real estate sector. So there are some methods associated with laundering illicit proceeds into the real estate sector. So as I go through each one, think if you can think of any examples or any experiences that you have that these trigger. First one, the purchases of real estate using large cash amounts. Sometimes if the deposit is 10%, sometimes they want to give 30%. Some people will tell you that they've saved it over a period of time. Some people could tell you it's from an inheritance. The second one is the use of third parties. And that's attorneys or the conveyancers or fronts to purchase and lease immovable property. You see a lot of people lease all these commercial buildings, but nothing ever goes in the building. The buying of building material, which can be purchased in cash or through successive deposits in the accounts of the construction material stores. Acquiring of mortgage bonds and settlement of the bonds using large cash amounts. Purposely defaulting payment of mortgage installments and later setting them off using lump sum amounts. Have you ever seen that one? All of these are actual methods that have been used around the world.
I know of an example, Ms. Archer, where a customer would have gotten a mortgage and they would have put, like, I think you mentioned it, large payments on it, like way above the payment amount, and within half of the time or even less, they got paid it off. They came back and got another mortgage, and we found that suspicious, and I think that one was escalated. I don't know what was the result, but that was really suspicious. Like within the time frame of about 3 years, the customer would have gotten would have applied for like 2 or 3 mortgages. And
what?
Yes. They would come in, make large principal payments, and then they would pay it off. And then when he looked there in there again, applying for another mortgage.
But why would the institution give the second mortgage?
Well, I think it was based on the customer's explanation as to where he got the funds from. And I think when he got all of those and they assessed it, it was like, okay, well, that's reasonable. I don't remember specifics, but it was reasonable. It was not, I think probably the second, and this would have been, they didn't come to the same branch. Like they go branch hopping, they know, like they would know how to do or whatever, try to circumvent like policies and different things. But it eventually caught up, and I think it was escalated, but I don't know whatever came out of it.
Yeah. That's one of the ways in which they do it. That's how you could really launder money. So I could come to say I want a mortgage, right? So the deposit is say it's 10% based on the credit rating. Let's say you want 20% or 25%. So I tell you, okay, well, I'll give you 35%. That's what I've saved up. So based on my age, you wouldn't think anything is wrong with that. You see what I mean? So I give you the 35%. And so you say, okay, your mortgage payment is $1,500 a month. So then I decided that I'm going to start depositing 5 instead. No one pays no attention. All they know is that the mortgage is being serviced.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Exactly. And if the person who gave the mortgage now, because they don't look at it afterwards, they already booked the mortgage loan, gone. They don't worry no more. But if you were to sit down and analyze it, hold on now, when this person came, when they gave me their expenses, how can they afford $5,000 a month or $6,000 a month? How could they do that? But those questions are not raised. The mortgage is being serviced. It's on nobody's radar. It just goes. Now the $5,000 or $6,000 a month that's being paid is not coming from my pocket. Someone else is paying that. The next example is a foreign PEP and nationals investing in real estate. And you know, that's one of the main reasons why we're being chiseled all the time by all of these foreign companies. The FATF and CFATF and all the rest of them is because they say a lot of foreign PEPs and nationals are buying land in the Bahamas, or they buy a home, as you can see. They'll buy a home for $2 million. They'll do some refurbishment, bring it to $5 million, and they put it on the market for $8 million. And there's a lot of that. Foreign national using locals to acquire real estate. That still happens. The use of corporate structures through buying and or owning companies or corporations which own real estate. We have that too. Remember, that's one of our products that we sell at IBCs. The use of third parties, such as minors or spouses or other family members of companies or a trust to register your real estate. And we have that here in the Bahamas. And then the use of unregistered real estate agents who are not accountable to the regulators. All of these examples I just gave, different methods, they have been seen in the Asian market. And they have examples where all of those were used. So listen to this case study here, fraud through real estate. Mrs. B, a director of a private hospital offering antiretroviral treatment to mothers and their children, manipulated the procurement and payment systems of the hospital. The hospital received periodic donations from external donors for operations and upkeep. Mrs. B and her husband, Mr. B, caused an account to be opened with a bank in a neighboring state in the name of a company incorporated in the neighboring state. Mr. B was a director in this company. In paying for supplies delivered to the hospital, Mrs. B submitted the account of her husband's company in the neighboring state, and huge amounts were indeed electronically transferred into this account. Using the funds from the hospital, the company bought a mansion in one of the affluent areas in the neighboring state and expensive cars. The property has since been seized through the mutual legal assistance agreements between the two countries, and the case is before the courts. The offenses were fraud and corruption. The industry was real estate, foreign banks, and foreign registered companies. The method, they use offshore accounts and they use IBCs. And the technique that they used was wire transfer and the purchase of high value assets. How did they do it? They did it through financial institutions and company registration. The instrument used was wire transfer. You see how simple it is? For an offense of money laundering.
Yeah, and those wire transfers, but you have to be careful with those.
Mm-hmm. But you see, but you see how they did it, right? They open up an account and then they use the funds from the hospital and transfer to that account, to a company account. And then they purchase land and cars. Okay, listen to this one. Mr. X, a senior accountant in a citrus exporting company dealing with suppliers from a neighboring state, siphoned huge amounts of money from the company. Ms. X was responsible for paying the company's creditors in the neighboring state. So she enlisted the help of two locals to go to the neighboring state to find a person who would offer a bank account so that she could deposit money while purporting to be paying a creditor without company superiors knowing. The duo found someone in whose account millions were deposited. This person would periodically withdraw the money and hand over to the two enlisted by Mrs. X for this purpose, after taking a substantial commission herself. The two enlisted persons would then come back into the country, take the money to Mrs. X, who would also give them their commission. This continued for a while, and Mrs. X constructed a block of modern flats, which she leased out. The flats have been seized, and Ms. X and her accomplices are awaiting trial, and she was extradited from the very neighboring state where she siphoned the money from after fleeing arrest. What was her offense? Theft and corruption. The industry she used, foreign banks and registered companies and real estate. The method, offshore accounts, use of third parties, cross-border transportation of cash, payment of fake suppliers. Her technique, periodical cash withdrawals and the purchase of high-value assets. Mechanism, financial institution. Instrument, wire transfer cash. Her indicators for building of modern leasing units on native land. Cross-border transportation of cash. Account opened without probable reason by a person with no stable income. The receipt of huge sums of money followed by periodic withdrawals, and international travels for no apparent reason. So you see why it is so easy for persons of high influence to launder money. Okay, so this is another case. Laundering through the real estate by using a mortgage and trust accounts. The investigations unit received a report from a reliable source that one lawyer, who had been engaged as a share transfer agent, had defrauded the complainants in the case of billions of dollars. The lawyer, Mr. X, sold thousands of shares on the stock exchange on behalf of the clients, but could not account for the proceeds of the sale. Investigations revealed the proceeds having been directly credited to the trust account of the lawyer's law firm to which he was the only signatory. Sound like some of them here. The investigations further revealed that Mr. X bought a house through a mortgage bond facility and used money from the trust account to redeem the mortgage before time. He further bought a latest version of a Chrysler motor vehicle. He invested money belonging to the clients from the trust account into the purchase of a lodge in a different town from where he was living. Mr. X also sponsored a very expensive kitchen party and wedding ceremony at one of the most expensive hotels in the city, using direct transfer of funds from the trust account. He also made a lot of cash withdrawals from the same account, and the money could not be traced as to what it had been used for. At the end of the investigations, Mr. X was arrested for theft and money laundering. So, someone tell me, what was the technique that he used? What technique did this lawyer use? We know what the offense was, theft and money laundering. He did it all by himself. So what was his technique?
He was layering it, like, was he layering it or he was putting it in?
Similar to he's using different client accounts.
Yeah,
And then his next technique was he got a mortgage. Remember, he paid it off early.
right. Like he used it to get like legitimate assets or like.
Mm-hmm. And then he used wire transfer and cash. So the indicators, and see, the indicators is the key things you have to learn when these transactions take place. He had cash withdrawals. He did a mortgage bond redemption before time. Purchases being made on behalf of the lawyer directly from the trust account. He had extraordinary expenditure on social events like weddings. That's how he, that's how he get rid of the money.
Right.
He had a very lavish lifestyle. He had a sudden change in his lifestyle because he purchased a lot of expensive cars. And then he bought prime residential estate. All of those are like triggers to tell you something is not right.
And he was the only signatory.
He's only signatory. So different ways people launder. In Asia, they have an example where someone laundered through real estate using the insurance industry, or laundering through real estate using an offshore shell company. I'll read you that one. A PEP was involved in a syndicate in which state funds were siphoned from government coffers. Sound like something I know. The syndicate incorporated a shell company in a foreign company. When the PEP's term of office came to an end, investigations were instituted relating to a corruption matter that took place during the PEP's time in office. Investigations revealed that the syndicate siphoned millions of dollars using another government account from which wire transfers were made to offshore accounts, including to a shell company. It was further revealed that the shell company was used to acquire a number of real estate in the PEP's country and abroad. Money was used by the PEP to pay his school children's fees and upkeep abroad. He also bought clothes in bulk without consideration, and his kids started living a lavish lifestyle. Upon conclusion of the investigation, the trio was arrested for corruption, theft, and money laundering. The properties were seized, and a number of them were forfeited to the state. His offense was theft, corruption, and money laundering. The industry was banking and real estate. The technique was wire transfer and investment. Instrument, wire transfers. What were the indicators? The property was owned by an offshore company without clear directors' details. The shell company purchasing property and unwilling to disclose the beneficial owners. Now you see why they asked for the beneficial owners registry?
Yeah.
Okay, government account being operated without proper procedures. Outward wire transfers to a PEP's child from a government account. That's a no-no. And lavish lifestyle. So
They sorry.
mhm.
They said that the kids went to jail too because they started living a lavish lifestyle as well.
Yeah, because it says here, the trio were arrested for corruption. So let me go back. A PEP was involved. When the PEP's term came to an end, It was a syndicate. It was a syndicate.
Mm,
There was the PEP along with two other government officials.
okay.
They did it together. Don't forget now, to be moving money from a government account and send it straight to your child's account, someone else has to be involved.
Right.
He couldn't do it by himself.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the general red flags was large and unexplained transfers or deposits, unusual buying transactions, repeated unexplained transfers or deposits, the use of unnecessary third parties during property transactions, the use of unusual methods of payment and settlement, complicated proposals where identity of the beneficial owner or the source of funds or both is not clear, complicated structures involving multiple jurisdictions for no apparent reason. Now that one there is another reason why they're always blacklisting the Bahamas. They don't feel like their nationals need to go abroad and open an account and then start doing investments in that jurisdiction or another jurisdiction nearby when you could just do it from your home country.
Hmm.
Of course.
I agree.
That's what
Speaking,
this whole fight is about.
we don't charge politicians though, like how we supposed to.
Ah,
But I leave that alone.
I have a recommendation from another document I'm going to read to you, and then I'll send it to you all afterwards.
Okay.
Next one, use of shell companies to buy property, and you know that we do a lot of that. Foreign nationals making huge investments directly in real estate using locals, yes. Fund structuring, yes. Liquidating mortgages using lump sum payments before time, yes. Payment of long leases of say 1 year by a tenant whose economic background is not sound, that happens too. Transactions by individuals who unexpectedly repay problematic loans or mortgages, or who repeatedly pay off large loans or mortgages early, particularly if they do so in cash. Transactions involving legal persons, which, although incorporated in the country, are mainly owned by foreign nationals who may not be resident for tax purposes. Now you see why they ask about the taxation of companies in the new suite of legislations.
Yeah.
Okay, where company, what is this, the commercial entity is whatever that thing is, where you have to establish whether or not you are resident here in the Bahamas for tax purposes. Transactions involving legal persons whose addresses are unknown or are merely correspondent addresses. So again, they're talking about IBCs, where the addresses are the registered agent. Establishment of legal persons to hold properties with the sole purpose of placing a front man or straw man between the property and the true owner. So again, they're looking at the way in which we would do the structuring for wealth management or asset protection. Transactions relating to the same property or rights that follow in rapid succession. Example, purchase and immediate sale of property, which often entails a significant increase or decrease in the price compared to initial purchase price. So here you could have a foreigner come here and purchase a piece of property and then decide in 6 months to 8 months that they don't really like it, or they were trying to get an airport strip and they say that it cannot do there. It's too expensive to put the strip here. Or they say the distance is too short for the type of plane that they have, then they sell it and they put the price for the land double the price that they paid, even though they did not do anything to the land. Never thought of that one, right?
Wow.
Okay. So this is some of the issues for consideration for the real estate sector. They're saying that countries are encouraged to effectively implement financial inclusion. So that's what the Bahamas did. The Compliance Commission, in their AML guidelines, they have included all of their registrants, which include the real estate and the lawyers. Improve regulation, supervision, and monitoring of the real estate sector. Countries are encouraged to have a legal framework which establishes regulatory authorities to the real estate sector. So that's the Compliance Commission. The legal framework which requires disclosure of the beneficial ownership. So now you know that all of those new pieces of legislation includes all of these sectors. Make it a mandatory requirement to know and disclose the beneficiaries, and that all parties should know their customers. Countries are encouraged to maintain electronic databases, and countries are encouraged to fully implement and monitor adherence with laws that cover stakeholders to the real estate. So now you see why there's so much pressure on the Bahamas in one, implementing these laws, and now they're looking to see how many cases are going to be brought forward and how many persons are being prosecuted. So the vulnerabilities of mortgage lending to money laundering risk. So the risk of money laundering in lending increases through the use of accelerated repayment schemes by way of lump sum repayments, or early termination of the loan. And the ways that lending can be abused for the purposes of money laundering or terrorist financing is as follows. One, the lender may obtain a mortgage loan from a financial institution and use legitimate property as security for loan, but then they do repay the loan with criminally derived funds. Or the loan or series of loan may be used in a complex network of transactions designed to hide the origin and ownership of criminally derived property. Or a launderer may deposit the criminally derived funds into a bank or acquire another form of property with such funds and then use the property as security for a mortgage loan. There's all kinds of different ways in which they can find ways to launder money. So if you have the time, you could look at the FATF 2007 report on money laundering and the real estate sector. And you get some more examples. Now, let me find this article. Okay, here we go. Okay, I didn't attach the document, okay. So money laundering methods in real estate. One they say is the use of third parties. We've discussed that before. Criminals can make the title deed on someone else while buying real estate. The third party is usually a family member with no criminal record. The property is purchased on their behalf, and the proceeds of crime are deposited into third parties' accounts. In this way, the criminals will not be directly mentioned in the incident. No one ever, if anybody ever seen that before? You know, sometimes someone may come for a mortgage, and someone may make the comment in the institution saying, oh, I know them, you know, but where they find that money from? They never hit a lick in their life. And that's because they're doing it on behalf of someone else.
So they don't tie it to that person.
No.
Or they can't seize their property later on.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the second method in real estate, it says the use of credit and mortgage. Credit and mortgage can be used as collateral for laundering crime proceeds. Refunds can be used to mix illegal funds with legitimate funds. The third one is manipulation of property values. Criminals may cooperate with third parties such as real estate agents to underestimate or exaggerate a property's value. Evaluating the property value with a sales contract lower than the actual purchase price is called undervaluation. Criminals may overestimate real estate in an attempt to get the largest possible loan from a lender. The larger the loan, the more illegal funds that can be laundered to service the debt. Anyone ever had that instance where people would have brought an application for a mortgage and they had overestimated the value of the land? Because it can be done, you know that, through a real estate agent.
Oh, you mean in the appraisal? Because I just was going to ask you, how would they overestimate it if they require an appraisal?
Of course, coming from the appraiser.
Oh, you mean through the appraisal?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I've never seen that.
Mm. Do you do okay? So let me ask then. Do you do a lot of lending to foreigners or just locals?
Just locals.
Just locals,
Mhm.
because even locals can do it too.
Mm.
Ms. Archer, how um you think about the Bahamas? I mean, how easy would that be in the Bahamas? Like, if you purchase a piece of property, let's say in Old Fort Bay
Mm-hmm.
or somewhere in the Western District, there are there's information that would suggest how much the property is valued. So how would a money launderer be able to use that method? I mean, I'm just trying to figure it out in the Bahamas. Maybe other countries. I'm just trying to figure out in the Bahamas, how would they be able to do that?
You mean the last example what I gave
Yeah,
in manipulating the property value?
yeah.
Pay off the appraisal.
Yeah, they have to pay off the
That's
appraisal.
it.
Yeah, so let's just say the value for the house is 3 million, but they have more money to launder. They can pay off the appraiser and say appraiser for 5 million.
Yeah, but I mean,
That's not.
realistically, if you think if you're a lender and you see an appraisal with, I mean, with $2-3 million more than what the average house costs in that area, that should alert you.
It should. It should. But don't forget now, if you're talking about out west and the Albany and those areas, all the houses are not valued the same. Because I know of a gentleman that's building a house in Albany now, and just the construction now, this is before he put anything in the house. The construction cost is 10 million. And there are some houses in there that are valued 3, some 4.5, some 5, the different amounts. It depends on how you construct the building. And then after that, what you put in the building. And then add to that the size of the land. So you see, the thing about it is this, you have to look at it from two sides. You may say, like you said, you don't see how that could be done looking at the area, right? In comparison to maybe other loans that you would have granted in that same area or your knowledge of the area. But if you look at it from an international perspective, it is impossible for a jurisdiction with the amount of activities, transaction, banks, not to have no cases of money laundering. How can that be? It is happening,
You
but
mean
it's
through
not being
real estate?
detected or reported
You mean through real estate?
through real estate and other sectors. Real estate, importation of cars. You see how many cars on this island? You need to see when the boat comes in from Japan. How many cars are offloaded? Then the cars just disappear. Where do they go? When you hear about the weapons that are being used, where do they come from?
Oh, yeah, that's a red flag.
But things are happening. Things are happening. So this is a red flag in real estate transaction. Red flag 1. Someone offers you money or some other observed benefit so they can use your credit to get a mortgage. And in this money laundering scenario, the person known as the buyer buys a property using his credit rating. However, it pays the down payment, the closing costs, and the mortgage payments with the criminal's money. The purchase purpose of the purchase is to place the proceeds of crime into the system by using real estate purchases on behalf of the person. The scenario is not only money laundering, but also mortgage fraud. By using a straw receiver, they hide the real beneficial owner of the property, and the identities of the criminals are protected. So that's what I'm saying. Someone could come to you, they could bring their job letter, but the mortgage is not really for them. It will be in their name, but it's not really theirs. Red flag 2, someone offers to pay you substantial cash payments, often beyond market rates for your property as part of a lease to own agreement. In this type of scenario, the purchase price is too good to be true. Criminals often cause some damage to property. For example, they're using the property for illegal purposes. Red flag 3, you own a business property and someone offers to enter into a lease to hold a commercial space, and as part of the deal, they offer to it. It is clear that in this money laundering scenario, the person making the rent payments has access to large cash resources. The goal is to put as much money as possible from criminal activities into the system through rent payments. So how do you overcome money laundering through real estate? The first one is a comment that was made earlier when you said, stop. I'll stop there. The first way you could overcome money laundering through real estate is asset declaration. Asset declarations mean public officials must declare their wealth before and after their time in government. To make sure this works, senior public officials should declare all their assets, not just some. They shouldn't be able to hide wealth under the names of family or friends. An independent body should make sure that what they say is true, and all declarations should be public. So anybody in under the sound of my voice, like they say, who are thinking of running in the next election next year, there can be some enhancement to our declaration. Okay, gatekeepers. Gatekeepers should know who is behind their corporate clients. Access to a beneficial ownership register will help them to verify their identity. They should report suspicious transaction to authorities, and the authorities should make regular checks and sanction negligent and complicit behavior by gatekeepers. They're talking about the money launderers, I mean the MLROs. And then legal registers includes the name of the real beneficiaries of the properties with an online central proof system showing who owns which property. This creates greater accountability over the origins of money in the market. So the last one is land registers. What did I say when we began this class? When we spoke about registered and unregistered land. What did I say? You remember when we spoke about that?
You say the Bahamas has our land on unregistered, eh?
Yes, we have unregistered land. And you see one of the recommendations they say that you need to have land registers.
Yeah. So why we didn't comply?
This is a recommendation. I'll tell you what the people normally say when you talk about land registration. They say if we did land registration, the lawyers won't have any jobs.
Exactly.
And so that's why
You
we
will be
still here.
surprised.
Yeah, we still here tuggling with the same thing. But notice the 3 recommendations that they gave. The first one they said is what? Asset declaration. The second one was regulation of gatekeepers. Now we know if you look at the first one, asset declaration. So our public officials, they normally would declare their wealth before. The only way you would get it afterwards is if they run for a second term. Agreed?
Great.
Right. And they say, and to make sure this works, senior public officials should declare all their assets and not just some. How do we know they're declaring all? Because some come in and say they only value 100,000, and after 5 years they value at 3 million. So where did it come from in between?
Agreed.
They shouldn't be able to hide. They say they shouldn't be able to hide wealth under the names of family or friends. Remember, this is another way. When I was telling you when they would purchase property in the name of a family or friend. And those could be proceeds from corruption. or it could be proceeds from gun smuggling, or from drug smuggling. And then they say independent body should make sure that what they say is true, which means that you have to go and verify for every assets that they say that they have, do they really own it? Because if you listen to the rumors on the street, there are a lot of things that they own that are in the names of companies that they are not declaring.
Mm.
So the first way to overcome money laundering in real estate is asset declaration. The second one is regulation of gatekeepers, which means that gatekeepers should always know who is behind every corporate client. They should have their name and verification of their identity. And of course, they have to report suspicious transaction. So we know the regulation of gatekeepers that is already in place with the 2018 legislation. If you do not report, you can be fined or you can go to jail. Under the FTRA, you know you have to identify who's the beneficial owner, and then you keep your register. So the third way where you can try to make sure that money laundering is overcome through real estate is land register, which is a big one because real estate is one of the largest sections in the market where real estate is actually used for money laundering. And it says it includes the name of the real beneficiaries of the properties. So if we go back to the very first one, which is asset declaration, where persons who are public officials can put names, put properties in the name of their friends or their children. I don't know how, if you can't get the asset declaration done properly, how are you going to get the land register done properly? Because we're talking about having an online central proof system. I think first you have to clear up the asset declaration and then you begin on the land register. But at some point in time, land has to be automated because it gives more accountability. And then you know where the money is coming from. How it is now, you really don't know how the money is coming, where it's coming from. Any questions? So I'm going to send you all that one. And then I have another one. This one here. Okay, hold on, it's loading up. Okay, money laundering methods. One, they say the use of third parties. We've already discussed that one. The use of loans and mortgages. We discussed that one. The manipulation of property values. We spoke about that. The structuring of cash deposits to buy real estate. Rental income to legitimize illicit funds. The purchase of real estate to facilitate other criminal activity. The renovations and improvement of property. And the use of front companies, shell companies, trust and company structures. The use of professional facilitators or gatekeepers. And then the last one is the overseas-based criminals investing in real estate in Australia. So there's in certain countries, they have already listed, they've already able to ascertain how much of real estate has been used for money laundering. And that's the point that the Bahamas has to get to, where it can identify how much of the real estate sector has been penetrated by money launderers. So it says here that the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions recovered approximately 10 million Australian dollars in assets, and the police retained 62.5 million in assets between the 1st of July 2012 and the 30th of June 2013. And the police retained residential property valued at $5 million as part of an investigation in March 2013. And approximately $8.1 million in property was retained as part of a project. So it says in Australia, the financial sector has identified high value goods, including real estate, to be a significant money laundering channel in Australia. Asset confiscation cases show the breadth of criminal investment in high value goods and the scale of criminal wealth that can be laundered and invested this way. So this is where the Bahamas has to get to. Where they're able to state exactly how much money has been used through the real estate sector. Any questions? I'm going to send both of these to you all. Let me come out of this. Any questions? Because sound like you all fall asleep now.
Okay, you say we have to get to the point where we have a registry of real estate transactions and where the funds came from?
No, we need a registry of who owns the properties.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what we need. Land registration.
Okay. Wait, now hold on. We don't have that at the registry?
It's not automated.
Oh, you mean automated? Okay.
It's automated.
Okay.
Start with that.
It's not automated.
Okay.
Ms. Dasha, sorry,
Yeah.
my mind was just on that, what you had said about the lawyers wouldn't make no money, and it makes sense because our politicians are lawyers, so they're not going to do that because they are the lawyers and they're the ones who, like, when they come out of politics, they go back to their firms and that's where they make the money. So that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, but I mean, if I understand that point and I agree to that point, that's their bread and butter. But for the country to move on and for us to grow, there are certain things that needs to be done. That is archaic. No one does that anymore.
I agree, and I think despite that, I think we should have registered land. Be to the point, like you say, it's archaic. We should have been away from that now.
Yeah.
My
And
question.
guess what? In other countries, they have online registration where you can look up any piece of land and see who owns it.
Seriously?
And,
Wow.
and their lawyers are still making money.
But I just was going to say that's not the only work that lawyers do.
No, it's not.
Ms. Arch, you foresee that happening anytime soon?
No. When I was in law school, they were discussing that same issue.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And that's been almost, let me see if I could count, if I could remember, 10, 30, almost 15 years.
Wow.
But what
And it should have been done long before that.
what prevents a lawyer from still charging the 2% of the conveyance or the mortgage? I mean, what prevents them from doing that?
Nothing, because you still have to prepare those documents. You still have to draft it.
So I don't see the land registry. I don't see them fighting a land registry because.
They have been fighting it though.
But why? I mean,
I don't know.
You have 2%.
I think it's going to expose too much things. I don't think it has nothing. I don't think it has anything to do with the money per se, but it's going to expose who owns what. I mean, even down to the shanty towns, who owns that land? Shanty towns are on.
You notice they never say who's the owner, right?
Exactly. It's going to expose too much things. That's why.
Who actually owns what?
Exactly.
And then people are going to be saying, "Oh, hold on." But I thought Grammy had said one time Daddy owns some property down in there, and the land was taken away and watch.
Yep.
Yep.
Land grabbing. Yep.
Uh-huh.
Must be responsible for those properties, meaning they supposed to do jail time doing. If they allow them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because don't forget now, what used to happen in the old days, my daddy said to me was, and he's gone now. He said what happened in the old days with his daddy. He said his daddy had a legal dispute and his daddy didn't have sufficient money for the matter to go to court. And he had to put up his property. And at the end of the matter, he lost the matter. And the lawyer said that the fees were taken up out of the value of his property. And they took his property.
I see a lot happening.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of that had to have been happening and probably still is happening because if you have nothing else, that's what you're going to put up.
Mhm.
Your land, and then they take it.
Majority of the Eastern Road is that's what happened there. If you do any kind of research on them, you could see that's what happened with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Eastern Road property was owned by blacks.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, but you all now have to argue for that. It's up to you all to argue for that. In my days, which is now, this is not happening. So you all have to argue for that. I just still don't see why it can't happen. If I saw a piece of vacant land down the road, 25 by, I don't know, 75, and it's been there from since I was a child, and I say, you know what, guess what? I could build a little 2 1-bedroom efficiency here and make some money. They shouldn't cost much. You don't know who it is. You got to go pay an arm and 5 legs, 4 dogs, and 3 cats just to figure out who owns it. It doesn't make any sense. And that's why you notice, hold on, and before I forget, you notice a lot of young people now just building onto their parents' houses, carrying it up all the way like the Tower of Babel.
Yes,
Yep.
that's
Mhm.
happening a
Okay.
lot. That is, you right.
Yes, because the price of land is too much and
It's-
there's still a lot of vacant land. There's a lot of abandoned buildings. And all government has to do is pass a legislation. There's sufficient, give them sufficient time for the family to make a decision. If after 5 years, after the probate, or the 5 years after the death, because some people don't do probate, the government takes the land, put it up for sale. And like everybody is afraid to do things, but change must come.
Agreed.
Okay, what the point you're going to make?
Well, I was gonna make a point, but you said something. I wondered why probates take so long.
At which stage are you talking about?
Well, writing up the form and submitting what
So you're
was
talking
allowed.
from the lawyer side, not from the court side.
Yeah,
My
So-
sentiments exactly.
from November last year.
Well, my one was from January this year. I'm still waiting, and I'm trying to figure out what is going on. This woman had no debts, so what are we waiting on?
Right.
That I don't understand. And you have the deeds to the property, so there's no search. You've spoken to the family. There is no other land. So what are you waiting on? I don't know.
Even
But you do know you could do it yourself, you know.
really.
Mm-hmm. But you need a lawyer to do the assent for the property.
You
You
can't
could
call.
fill out the forms yourself.
I filled out the form,
Uh-huh.
submitted it, but
To the-
they're
to the-
saying they're waiting for reply back from the institutions. One is the teachers, no workers say, and that's I don't know why that's taking so long.
And you're the executive of the estate?
I am, and my brother is.
That ain't a
Okay.
priority for the lawyers. That's all. Just ain't a priority. I mean, how much money you can make from preparing a probate to go to the
Depending
court?
on the asset,
Yeah, depending on the assets, the value of the assets.
they make a
But-
percent.
Yeah, they make a percentage. But the thing about it is this, that if it's like the bank don't tell you when the lawyer writes and say, does ABC have an account with you? They'll just tell you yes or no. They're not going to give you what the figure is.
But I put the figure down.
Yeah, so what's the whole up?
I don't
Because
know.
they're not going to confirm it until after you get the probate.
Mm.
So they need to just do the probate on what it is, and then what you do is you file an amendment afterwards.
Right.
stating the actual figures. So, like I say, I don't see why everything is taking so long. Why is there always a bottleneck
Yeah.
for
I don't
things
know.
that are very simple? Now, if the person had a lot of debts, then of course, you have to wait for all the creditors to put in their claim. Then
Right.
you'll have to go and make sure that the claims are legitimate claims. Then you will have to go and make sure you get the value of the assets to see which assets are you going to sell in order to pay them off and whether anything will be left for the beneficiaries. That's a
Right.
different case. But when there are no bills to be paid,
Ah,
why are we going on forever and forever and a day?
amen.
I don't understand. I remember when I did my internship in the probate registry, this lady came over and over again. And when I finally found an application, the only thing on the application was one car. Like, why?
Wow.
Ridiculous.
Yeah,
Can you-
but that's what I'm saying. There's so many bottlenecks on things that can make life easier, can make life less stressful, and so the economy be more productive.
Right.
There's just too many. There's too many roadblocks for simple things, and
My
I don't understand it.
well, my first initial statement was I don't work in the bank any longer. I've been on the bank for years. I mean the branch, sorry, but I work
Okay.
in loan administration, so I see a lot of loans over, come over my desk. But I did a mortgage this same week. It was Monday, and it was a gated community. This person was purchasing a lot. I saw for the first time the easement.
Oh, okay.
That's stipulated in that. And
Mhm.
what was brought to my attention was they didn't use the attorney listing. They said because it would be prejudice against the other attorneys, so they can go with their own. I don't know if you heard that. That was different.
Mm-mm.
That was different for me.
Yeah.
Mm.
So they use their own attorney.
What did they say, Pentard?
They were able to use their own attorney that was not on the approved listing.
And the bank allowed that.
Hmm.
Because normally they don't.
Right. That's as far as I knew. That's how it was.
Right.
But
I remember what we said earlier after the incidents where they had all of those rogue attorneys. That's why they came up with their list. They only have the attorneys on there who they know when they send documents, it's going to be done and done properly and registered.
so they're asking the lawyer, our lawyer at the bank, meaning, is asking the lawyer for certain documents, and they would do an interview with that lawyer before proceeding.
Ah, okay.
So if that was something new.
They got to make
That,
sure.
that, that sounds like that's something new, but you know what could have happened also? The after all those matters with the rogue lawyers, then they realized that only certain law firms probably were making money.
Right.
Those on the list. So now they want that little
That
bit of peanut butter and jelly to be spread around.
agree. That was one of
Yeah.
the explanations there. They don't want it just to be confined to just certain lawyers.
Yeah. But after that, after those scandals with those lawyers, that's what they did. They confined it to certain lawyers. All of those foreign banks decided they didn't want any more of those little small mom and pop law firms. They didn't want them.
Okay.
They wanted big firms.
As well as I saw too that they agreed to pay the real property tax. Because yeah, because I mean it could be where the seller is actually, well, it's a like I said, gated community, but it could be where the seller is actually responsible for that, right? But it depends on the.
Depends on the agreement.
I wasn't gonna pay it, but yeah.
I guess if you want it that bad, and it depends on the amount you'll say, okay, I'll pay it.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess I could be fraudulent as well too, like money
Of
laundering.
course.
Of course. Okay.
Especially if it's a very, very large amount. And you'll have to think about that. This is very strange. I did offer to pay for that because there's no oil at the bottom of this land. It's just surely there's no gold. There ain't no diamonds. So what is it you after?
Yeah.
And then you'll have to follow that to see whether or not they make any large payments.
Gotcha.
Lump sum payments, yeah. Just to make sure that everything is on the up and up.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now don't become police cops now. It's only for your awareness. Some people, after they learn these things, they become police cops. they everything they see, they think is suspicious. So just in case. All right. So we have any questions? Miguel is going to send you all the 2 handouts. I sent it to him already.
Thank you.
Yeah. So he'll have it in his database. All right. So next week you have Mr. Glenn Nottage. He will finish the course. Why y'all gone silent?
We ain't gonna see you no more.
I just was gonna ask her that. This is the last class for you?
Yes.
No, man.
Really?
Yes, man. Say no, man.
I didn't
Yes, you
I
have
had to
to
look for my schedule. OMG.
Yes.
Agree with you. Mhm.
Yes. Well, you get mixed up with the chapters, now you get mixed up with the schedule. Yes. OMG. Yes, this is my last one. All right. And
All
now
right.
I'll write your exam questions from my chapters.
You
Oh.
you like stating this. Question.
Well,
I could.
you're good, right? Yeah, I'll write my exam questions.
So, Ms. Acha, are you gonna send us any like review questions or any like
Yeah,
no.
I will. I'll send it through Miguel. I'll tell you all the areas to focus on.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
I will do that.
All right.
Who asked that question? What day in the class?
Yeah, so I did 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So I did the first 4. Remember? Payment land law, understanding conveyancing, different types of mortgages, the law relating to mortgages, and then the practical exam of the documents. And then, of course, tonight was customer due diligence, which is really looking at money laundering through the real estate sector. Right. So that's where my questions will come from. And they will not be multiple choice.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Archer, for.
You're most welcome, but no multiple choice.
Would you say but multiple choice?
None.
No multiple choice?
No. No. You all are professionals. No. No.
I was only joking. I like people when they laugh.
No, none of that. Short answers.
Okay.
Yeah, short answers.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks again.
You're most
thank you very
welcome.
much.
Yes, it's nice meeting all of you.
Yes, likewise.
Yes.
Okay.
So enjoy the rest of the class.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to some good answers.
We'll give you some good answers. Thank you.
Yes.
Hey,
and you all are quite knowledgeable, so you know I'm not gonna make it easy.
No.
I gotta make you all think a little bit. Just a little, not too much.
Just a little.
All right.
Just a little.
That's always good.
Yes, it's always good, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
We'll be ready.
All right.
All right.
So
All
enjoy
right.
the rest of your week.
Okay.
Thanks.
You
Have a
too.
good night.
Bye.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good night.
Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.